Welcome to The Vault at 201 North Broadway, podcast for innovators and problem solvers talking all things small business, entrepreneurship, and workforce development.
On today's episode of The Vault, we are joined by an individual that is fluent in Mandarin Chinese and lived in China for over 10 years. He specializes in helping companies and individuals with product sourcing, logistics management, and import compliance. He has experience in trade agreement policies and import tariffs, and is an individually licensed U.S. Customs broker, and is one of our very own Rock 31 members, Owen Haacke.
你好，欢迎来到金库。
Hello, welcome to the vault.
Yes!
Thank you to the Small Business Development Center for sponsoring The Vault at 201 North Broadway. The Small Business Development Center provides you with free one-on-one counseling, business plan assistance, marketing research, financial projection assistance, and more to small businesses.
Welcome, Owen. Thank you for joining us today.
Glad to be here. This is awesome.
We mentioned just a little bit ago that you're a Rock 31 member.
I am a Rock 31 member.
Yeah, so you've been with us for quite a bit.
Yes.
Like almost since opening.
Yeah, I think a month after opening started, I think it was October 15th was when I first started.
Perfect. I
Yeah,
love
just
that.
opened. So, Owen, let's just dive right in. Where did you grow up?
Grew up here in Billings, Montana, born and raised. Grew up close to Rose Park. Went to Poly Drive Elementary School, Lewis and Clark, and then senior high. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So, senior high Bronc. I love asking people that grew up in Billings which school they went to because I feel like they all say it with like a different like tone. So
Is that
that's
right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think it's hilarious. I'm not being from here myself. I think it's so funny. So that was great. That's fun. So what are some things that you grew up doing? Like hobbies, other things? What was it like growing up in Billings?
Yeah, growing up in Billings was great. You know, when I was a kid, living close to the park, going down to the swimming pool, playing baseball.
Oh, you play baseball?
I did when I was younger, yeah.
That's fun.
Definitely remember that. From my youth, got into running. I was doing cross country, and then also loved doing outdoor activities. So loved to go fishing. Started doing some hiking and backpacking too in high school with friends, and always loved that. Did some rock climbing on the rims. So a lot of outdoor activities too, and that's what I really enjoyed. Being here, used to go to the old Steep World downtown a lot, which was fun when they had the small location.
They had a small that's cool.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I wish they were.
started downtown, yeah.
I wish they were still downtown. It'd be close to our office here, which would
You
be
just
sweet.
Go,
just like
go do some climbing on
Yeah.
lunch.
totally could.
That's really so. When you were in high school, you were doing all like the backpacking and
Yeah,
everything. So your parents would be like, "Cool." Like, would you stay overnight? Like when you'd go?
Yeah.
Or, okay. Cool.
yeah, we did. And sometimes just go out with a group of friends on the weekend.
Terrifies me,
And
you know,
then-
because of Bigfoot. And
Yeah,
Bears
totally.
and stuff.
oh, yeah, bears and stuff, yeah.
totally. But yeah, no, that's there was a lot to do, and yeah, that just kind of I think ingrained this love for the area and Montana and the outdoors at a younger age, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Where did that lead you into the importing industry?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's kind of different.
Billings, Montana, and then you're like, "But I'm leaving at right?" Because you left at college for college.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. No, so I also in high school started getting into languages, so studying. Actually, it was from taking Latin. I took Latin in high school in
Oh, me too.
Mr. Feely's class at senior high, which was awesome, and was really loved that class because it involved like the language component, but also kind of the history and cultural component of it, and that really got my brain turning. Just thinking about how relationships between countries can, and how trade is so important between them. Is like in Latin class we were talking about, ancient Rome and Greece and grain trade between Egypt and all of that. And I was like, wow, this is pretty fascinating. And I think for me, it's just kind of this more visual image romanticizing, international trade. And I could imagine all of that. And it just kind of sparked an interest. And then when I was a little bit later in high school, wanted to travel. Just looking for opportunities to go overseas. I had went to Europe with Latin class, which was sweet. Really loved that.
Where'd you go?
We went to Rome in Italy. So yeah, definitely. It was so cool. Love that trip. And then I was interested in saying, hey, what else is out there? Had an interest in going to Asia too, just from reading about it. And me and one of my friends in high school took a summer course, a language course in Beijing. That was be my junior year, I think, summer.
Of high school.
Yeah, of high school.
Okay.
So
Do you find that you learned the language faster because you were immersed in the culture?
yeah, and that one was pretty cool because we went over there, and I think it was only a month and a half, but it was just really focused, basically full all day, learning the language. And we were able to kind of get to the point where we could have conversations. And I think that was really exciting for me. I had tried that a little bit, like when we were in Italy, studied some Italian, and that was kind of cool. I could like order some stuff, and I was like, wow, this is really cool. And then with Chinese, was able to kind of dive into that and get to the point where I was like, could have a little bit more substantial conversation. And at that point, I was studying some Japanese and some Arabic, just more out of interest. I was like, hey, I want to go live overseas for a few years, and I know that'll really help me learn the language and just like get totally immersed. And but yeah, had that opportunity in high school, which was really cool to do that.
No, that experience is really unique. And I think what's cool about that is still now, I don't know how old you are, I won't guess, but that you still remember that as being such like a pivotal moment for you as like a young adult, high schooler coming into like, okay, what's next after I graduate, and getting some of those really unique experiences at a young age. And you're, like high school, that's so cool, traveling to abroad to Europe. I mean, we traveled to DC, but that was about as far as we got. Which is
We
still
got to go to
fun. It was a
Butte.
big deal. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. Kayla. Out of Helena, they didn't ship you somewhere cooler?
Oh,
That's really cool.
Berkeley Pitt. Yeah.
Welcome to Butte. You probably kind of got a little bit of the Irish culture by being there a little bit.
Yeah,
Totally.
sure.
That's awesome. Field trip to the pit.
Oh, that's...
I won't even tell you where my 5th grade field trip was.
least you
It
remember
wasn't
it.
great.
At least you remember it.
So that experience, just kind of diving deeper into different cultures and learning different languages, really brought you. Is that when you decided, I'm going to move over to China, and then you got into the importing industry that way?
And I'm also curious to add on that. So it's interesting to me because having been to Europe a couple of times, it seems like if that's wherever you ended up at, which we'll get to in a second, tell us too about like what were some of those things in that culture that stood out to you a little bit more and that drew you in?
I think, was really interested in Europe from the history angle, and I still am. I love looking at ancient history and from that. And then just I think Asia was attractive because there was just a lot going on in terms of like development and the news. And this was before like the Olympics happened in Beijing in 2008.
Were you there during the Olympics?
I was there right before it.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
So I kind of saw them getting ready for it. And there's just so much change going on. Super exciting. And that was one of the draws for me to go there. And I knew I wanted to, so I wasn't like set on moving out to China necessarily. I was kind of looking at different options, but I did want to study abroad for a couple of years, and I was different programs in the US. I was going to different universities, and back then they didn't really have very long-term study abroad programs.
Okay.
It'd only be like a semester.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
there was a couple of universities. I remember I was looking at like Western Washington University, Seattle University, and a bunch of them I was talking to, and they had Chinese programs and stuff, and some study abroad programs, and but they were all only like a semester, and I knew I wanted to spend a little bit more time overseas, so I could really kind of immerse myself, like you were talking about. That's really important to me. And after doing the summer program in China with my friend from senior high, one of the instructors that was there that I connected with, kind of said, hey, why don't you just go to school out here if you want to do that? It's cheaper. You can dive right in. They're good programs. There's a lot of other people that will go in. So basically enrolling in a Chinese university directly in a program that's kind of focused for non-native speakers. So I thought, hey, that sounds like a good option to jump right in. Ended up doing that and just enrolled in the university that teacher had recommended to me because it seemed like a pretty solid program. And just went from there.
That's awesome. So here you are in China now, going to school. What was that like? How different was it than schooling here?
Yeah, no, I remember I was just thinking about that before we talked, and I just remember I had never been to the city I was going to school in, and I took a train. I had my suitcase, and I took it up this city that my school was in, Dalian, China, and I remember I had a paper map because I didn't have a smartphone back then, and I got to the train station in this city, and I was looking at my map, and I was like, there's the university, and I'm walking with my little roller suitcase to go to school for the first day, and it was raining outside, and it's never been to this city before. It was kind of an interesting experience.
But you navigated there okay with your paper map.
I did. I remember it was very wet.
I could do that.
All these people listening, you can do it.
With
Paper
map.
Yes.
Maps are a thing.
Totally.
And so in Europe, we're very lucky, I think, as English-speaking people, because a lot of places, European countries, also speak English. That's the common language. Was that the same case in China for you, where people still, spoke Chinese or all of those things? Did they speak English too?
Not where I went to school. And that was one of the reasons my teacher recommended that city to me, was because there weren't many English speakers. Actually, when I'd run into someone on the street, because it's really close to Russia, and it's actually close to the border in North Korea, the people on the street would see me walking down the street, and then they'd assume I was Russian. And then, so I think a lot of the Chinese there would speak Russian. So they'd say hello to Russian. They'd say, you start speaking Russian to me instead of English.
Do you know any Russian?
So I don't.
I don't know that either. So.
I don't. But so that was kind of interesting. And that was part of the choice there, is to intentionally choose a place where there were not many native English speakers, and there really weren't. And that was just a good place to be to learn. I remember my first day going to registration for classes and stuff. Everything's in Chinese and no one speaks English, so I have to kind of work with it. And
my God, that would be so difficult.
It was
where
difficult.
You're I am here to learn the language, but I haven't learned it yet.
Yeah.
I think I would cry and be because your parents, they're bye, send you on the plane with your luggage. I assume. I'm sure
your rolling bag and your paper map.
Yep.
Oh, gosh.
But it was a great way to learn really quick. I just had to, and then made some really good friends there that were able to kind of help me through and have it was an awesome. I learned really quick. I had to basically get to the point where I could have a conversation and function within a couple of weeks. And then not having other people speak English was just put me in a situation where I just had to study all the time. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Was it frustrating at moments? When you're in that, I don't know, I would think of myself in that situation. I'd be I think I'd just be annoyed because not annoyed, but just I just need to learn it quickly, but I'm working on it, but I still can't. I can't have conversations because I don't know what they're saying, and I can't read anything.
Yeah.
I can't look it up on Google because I don't have a ssmartphone. Do you know what I mean?
My map only goes so far.
I had a little paper dictionary that I'd carry around, and then whenever I'd see a word I'd just look that I didn't know, I'd look it up. I just had my paper dictionary all the time. It was awesome. And then
So you had a pocket dictionary?
I
Is
did.
that what you're talking about?
Yep.
Wow, you are getting cooler and cooler by the minute.
I know. Pocket dictionary.
I love it.
Yeah, but it was definitely frustrating sometimes. That was the point where I was taking classes full time, and then I got a tutor every day after classes just so I could get to the next level quicker. Because I did have those frustrations. I was I need to be able to communicate better. School, we were learning, building new vocab, having conversations and stuff, and I was I just need someone to really work with me on some conversational stuff so I can get up quicker. So. It was pretty much studying, all day, and then having the tutor on beyond that in the first year that really pushed me to then, the next year, I felt really comfortable.
Yeah. Did you work while you were going to school?
I did. So I did teach English for a little while part-time to make money my first year. And then actually I started Empress Brokers, my current business, when I was in college.
Oh, wow.
And I started, that was a ton of fun because everyone in my program, basically I got into the international trade side of things because the program I was in was focused on international trade. And everyone in my class basically was teaching you how to do import-export, to start an import-export business, to work for a freight forwarder, just in that whole realm were the courses that we were taking, how to get into that space, into the international trade and logistics space. So a lot of my classmates were, doing similar kind of work, or they were moving on, after they graduate to go work in that field. And I thought, hey, I'm going to start, doing some work part-time here myself, doing some product sourcing and helping companies find manufacturers here. And that's when I started getting onto that platform Upwork, which is back then it was called Odesk. And then I used that and I got some clients in the US to do it part-time. My first one was a dog collar manufacturer based out of Brooklyn. And then they made cool products, these fancy leather dog collars, but they also did like the sleeves that you wear for training police dogs.
Yeah.
So they had it was a pretty good business, and I helped them with some of their packaging and some other products. So that was a good learning process for me while I was in school, basically taking what I'm learning in class and applying it to make money, which was sweet. And then I'd registered one time when I came home in the summer. I think, it was 2011 when I registered the business in Billings, just across the street at the Wells Fargo. When I was home for like summer vacation, I was like, I need to get an LLC so I can take payment from these U.S. clients and they think I'm legit. And it worked. And then I was doing that part-time, Empress Brokers part-time while I was in school, and it was cool.
So was the school, like a traditional college experience in the sense of like you had other classes other than like language, things like that? And then like, is it 4-year or was it less?
Yeah, it was a 4-year program, and it was, there was different requirements. A lot of it was focused on the language side the first 2 years, and then the second, the first 2 years were just focused on language. And then I studied the first year to where I could pass tests to basically skip my second year. And that was part of the motivation for getting the tutor too. So I actually skipped my second year because I passed the prerequisites for that, and then jumped right into like the substantive kind of topics on international trade and all of that. And then there was a variety of different courses. So you'd have like legal ones, you'd have, a freight forwarding course, and then I'd have some cultural courses and stuff, language. I remember I had to write a essay about the guy that invented tofu.
Oh, wow.
So stuff like that. It was like a historical one that was kind of fun. And then you had to do like electives. I had to take a Tai Chi class, and that was the one class. Tai
Chi's great for you.
That was the one class I failed.
Oh.
So,
Kayla.
It's like,
so that's great.
So I was the only guy that failed Tai Chi class.
I know. I was sitting here like,
you're like, huh?
Like, you were in school hustling,
Yeah.
started a business, which is we'll get more into that in a little bit. But
Yeah.
what are some fun things that you did when you were there?
Travel around, we'd just hang out and go to the parks and stuff. So my friends around the area. We did some traveling, went up to the border of North Korea, which was kind of cool.
Did you go in?
Actually went across, there's a bridge there that was bombed by the Americans, and it actually goes over the border, but the bombed outside, you can't cross it. So I did cross the border into North Korea. But you couldn't continue on the bridge because it was all broken because it was bombed out, the Korean War. But that was kind of cool. Stuff like that, just around the area. I didn't travel too much because I was,
busy.
I was busy.
It seemed like you were
And
quite
college
busy.
students are kind of poor.
And I was poor.
You were probably raking in millions.
Marcel,
of
you're just
dollars.
assuming he was poor.
I was.
Oh, I was. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like
I was totally broke, and even though my expenses were super low, but once I started doing Empress, I was like, whoa, I'm making, I was making like, an extra $500 a month or something with my client. But for me, it was like, hey, this is awesome.
Yeah.
And then it started increasing to where I was like, hey, this is pretty good. But I didn't, did some traveling, hung out, and you would go to the park. We'd play this hacky sack game. It's called a Jenza. It's like a hacky sack with feathers on it. We just play that all the time. It was a ton of fun.
Like in a circle.
Yeah, you can
you
circle
still
and
have
kick
one?
it. Exactly.
Hacky sack.
I do have one. I should bring it to the office.
You
It's
should.
really
We'd love to
sweet.
try.
Yeah,
I'm
I
really
should.
terrible at hacky sack, so I can only assume I'll be just as bad. But
Same.
It's a ton of fun because
We'll
it goes
play.
up in the air and it has feathers, so it drops down a little slower, so it gives you some
Oh,
time
that
to
might
kick
be
it.
helpful.
okay, maybe
Yes.
we'll be a little better at it. So, you lived in China for 10 years. What were some of the cultural differences that intrigued you about China?
There's a lot. I think it was the just some of the mindset too, being with, everyone's kind of hustling there. Everyone's in this mindset of improvement and self-growth because, China's coming from an area and back then where it was like everyone's kind of upgrading their lives, and they have new opportunities, new access to internet. And at that point in time, everyone just seemed super stoked about everything, and what they were doing, and wanting to create their own businesses and just learn about the world. It was just a really exciting kind of place to be. Not to say that, people aren't like that all over the place, but it just felt like most people there had that kind of, go get them kind of attitude, and wanted to learn about new things. And then also just the, outside of that, just the kind of history in China too was super interesting to me. I definitely didn't dive too much into the, not a historian by any means for China or Asia, but being able to explore a little bit, how Buddhism has influenced China and go visit some of those temples and all of that. It's just kind of this cool experience that you're not able to get, here in the U.S. And
Awesome.
So college, tell us about the rest of that because you weren't in school for 10 years. Even if you were, that'd be cool. Hopefully you came out with some great degrees. But so you're getting towards your junior, senior, or whatever they probably call it something different, those last couple years of school. And then, what led you to stay? Because originally your plan was maybe I'm going to go study abroad and then figure it out from there.
Yeah, originally my plan was to, study abroad and then move back to the U.S. And work. And I started getting interested in the international trade policy side of things just as I got more into this. We studied a little bit of that in school. And I wanted to learn more about, institutions like there's the World Trade Organization, who's making these laws and regulations. In the U.S., there's a bunch of different laws and regulations on import and export. And I got kind of firsthand experience through doing my business, running into some of the challenges that companies face when they're importing stuff into the U.S. and really wanted to dig a little bit deeper and understand the whole regulatory side behind all of that. And I had an opportunity then to move back to the U.S. after school and then work as an internship as a trade associate at the Senate Finance Committee. That was when Senator Max Baucus from Montana was actually the chairman of the committee. So I had an opportunity to join their trade team, which was very much focused on the stuff that I was doing. It was super exciting, and I learned a ton there. And that was in Washington, D.C. And then after that, I was kind of planning on staying in the U.S. and developing a career in D.C. Focused on international trade policy and stuff like that. Wanted to have something that was focused on China or Asia because that's where I had some of my expertise, but wasn't totally set on it. And then worked in another government organization there for a little while, and then moved over to a nonprofit that was focused on helping U.S. companies that have trade with China or sell their products in China. And that was a really cool opportunity because it was kind of focused right up my alley. What I had studied, I had wanted to work there. I remember in college, I was looking at this organization. It's called the U.S.-China Business Council. And I was like, this is really cool. They had cool reports that I'd read in school. I referenced a bunch of them in my essays that I wrote when I was going to school. And so it was cool to have the opportunity then to go and work for them. And then they had an opening after I was there for, I think, only a year. And they had an opening in their China offices. And they're like, hey, do you want to move out to Shanghai because you speak Chinese, be a good fit. But originally at that point, I wasn't really set on going back to China, but it's a good opportunity for me. And then I moved back out and then was there another 7 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So what were some of those things that you experienced and learned during that time in Shanghai? Because that's a different, how close was it to where you were originally at?
Yeah, no, it was a really cool opportunity because with that organization, have the opportunity to really work with all the large U.S. companies. It's a membership-based association. They're a nonprofit, but their members are all the Fortune 500 companies, U.S.-based ones. So I had a really cool opportunity to work with any company that from Apple to Walmart to some of the software companies, and learn about their challenges, obstacles, and all that. Doing business in China, and then also just globally too. What are challenges that businesses face firsthand? How do they deal with them? And then being involved in helping them find some of the solutions to their problems. I mean, basically, we were operating as consultants and taking on projects for them where they had specific questions and concerns about operating in China. Being based in Shanghai, I got to work with a lot of the manufacturers that had manufacturing operations because there's a lot there, which was a ton of fun. And learning about how things are made from, one manufacturer we worked with makes a product called Carbon Black that's in anything that's black color, like your laptop's black or your tires. And, they produce all of that there and sell it all over the world, and helping them with some of their challenges and just learning a little bit more about how the world works from that kind of more macro perspective was super interesting. And then there was some policy changes and stuff with import tariffs in the U.S. and helping companies navigate all that gave me a really in-depth understanding of those challenges and how to overcome them. And it made some good relationships there too. One of the companies I work with, he's actually formerly at Best Buy. He's based in Shanghai. I work with him regularly, and then have a good network there of folks that are involved in international trade. And a lot of folks there would work in Shanghai for a while and then move on to a different post somewhere around the world. So it's really kind of given me this cool, expansive network that I'm still in contact with.
That's so cool.
That is really
I'm
cool.
like envious of that in a way, but in a good way. Like, I think it's just so cool. And then as you meet more and more people, like the world seems so big, but it gets a little bit smaller in a way as you meet people from everywhere. Taking us back to DC a little bit, what was it like living there? Did you like it after living in China and then coming back and you're living in DC? Did you like that? What was living there like? Working?
When I think about it, I think my immediate reaction is no, I didn't like it. I think it was because I do now, but it was also kind of a hustle because it was my first job. I think I was making like $1,500 a month, and then my rent was like $1,600 a month. So it was just like,
really stressful.
and then it was like just entering the workforce. So it was like work all the time. But I did, made one of my best friends there who I met that I was working with, and some awesome people that I met when I was in DC that I'm all still in contact with. I wouldn't say it was like particularly fun, but it was super important part in my, career. I think just kind of, entering the workforce, learning how to be a professional. And, now that I think about it, a lot of my close friends I made in those years when I was in DC. But DC is an awesome place to live. I didn't realize that until I was about to move away. I lived right next to this cool park, but I never went there. It's like all like the fun stuff. I didn't really do it when I was in DC. So if I have the opportunity to go back to DC, I'll definitely take some time to do some of that stuff. But
the cool thing about DC too is just people who are going to visit is most things are free there.
Yeah,
like
totally.
like the
museums
mall,
and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yep.
Most of them are free.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, totally. And I think I went to like one of them.
So, which one did you go to?
I went to the Air and Space Museum.
Oh, that one's really cool.
I went to a few others too, actually, while I was there. I think, Smithsonian.
Oh, yeah.
And then,
I got to see Dorothy's ruby red slippers.
Oh, nice.
And Archie Bunker's chair.
Yeah.
Which is like a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there was I think it's the National Portrait Gallery was really cool by Metro Station. This like had a bunch of U.S. artists, and I love that place. So, yeah, so many cool places. Super walkable city too. I'd love to go back and spend a little time there.
Yeah.
But yeah,
that's so
There's
cool.
There's definitely a hustle there too, I think. Like you were talking.
Oh yeah, you're moving and grooving for sure.
It's a little bit different. I was actually just talking with my friend about that, who also lived in DC. I mean, everyone's working for the government or selling stuff to the government, so it's just a totally different vibe. Whereas, like it'd be like the comparison between like DC and New York, whereas New York's more commercial, banking, financial world, and probably totally different vibes between those cities. And Shanghai's kind of more like the New York commercial side, and then whereas Beijing's more like the government side. So it was kind of nice to be around other people when I moved to Shanghai that were actually like working on businesses, or like they managed factories. They had their own, consulting companies, and it was just that we're not necessarily directly focused on selling to the government or in that space. So that was pretty cool.
So you mentioned that you've done these two things. You did that your one job, which was the like trade policy team in DC, and then you did the director and chief representative of the U.S. China Business Council in Shanghai. What a title.
Yeah.
As a younger, too, like that's a big
pretty
job.
young, yeah.
Out of college, you had one job and then that was your other, that's a big job.
It was more responsibility than I probably should have had, to be honest with you, but it was,
you rose to the occasion.
Yeah, it was there, and I got to meet a lot of cool people, and particularly since we were a small office in Shanghai, when people would come to Shanghai, these could be like U.S. company executives. A lot of times they'd meet with us, so we got to meet a lot of cool, senior executives. I met the CEOs of a number of Fortune 500 companies when they came out, and got to speak with them. Walmart, J.P. Morgan, and stuff. And it was cool. I'm like, wow, I get to sit in a meeting, and this guy wants to hear some insights, from me, even though it was kind of more broad, what's going on in the commercial environment and stuff. It was such a cool opportunity just to be, sitting in the same room and sometimes having conversations with those people.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, with those two roles, were you continuing to do your
Empress?
Your Empress here?
I actually was, when I was at U.S. China Business Council, I continued to do it on the side. And when I was in D.C., I was doing it. I actually had some clients that were in Montana. I was making surfboards. I was making pizza boxes. I was making all kinds of stuff for them, or helping them organize it and connect with manufacturers and organize the logistics of it. And I was just doing it kind of as a side hustle. And
especially in DC, when
to help with the other $100 of rent.
Yeah, no, exactly. I guess
so you could eat, and then you could eat.
Right. It was like my salary was $1,500 and my rent was $16, and then I had to supplement somehow. So I was actually, when I was in DC, I was actually doing pretty good with Empress Brokers. I remember I was keeping pretty busy, and then when I moved into a kind of outside of like the internship or associate world, where I had a full-time job and then was getting promoted, it's just taken more time of my time. And then ended up, I think last time I stopped working for any Empress clients, it was either end of 2017 or 2018. So I was doing it when I was in DC and then when I was in Shanghai, but I think I always wanted to do that full time. I started my business for a reason. In 2010 is when I started doing it, and I loved, that excitement of being able to offer different kinds of services to clients that I want to work with. But getting promotions and salaries and healthcare and bonuses is attractive because it's good. Nice. It's very nice. It's good, and that stability makes it hard to say I'm going to do my own business full time, even though maybe that's what in my heart I wanted to do that. And then so it's about 2018. At that point, I had no more revenue coming in with Empress Brokers just because I was so busy in my full time job, but still maintained the registration of the company, and then filed with the Montana Secretary of State every year and stuff like that, just to keep it going, because I think I knew I wanted to go back and use Empress Brokers somehow in the future. So
when did you take that leap and you go, okay, I'm going full time into this. I'm ready to cut ties and go.
It was really the COVID-19 pandemic that gave me the push to do that, because I was actually in the U.S. When a lot of that broke out, and I got to the point where they canceled visas and international travel, so I couldn't go back to my position in China. And it gave me some time to kind of think about it and think about what I really want to do. I think I was basically locked out from international travel for 6 months. I still had my stuff there, still had
Yeah,
my
I was just about to
apartment.
ask. I was like, your apartment is probably just sitting there.
Yeah. So
Hopefully you didn't have a goldfish.
No,
Bye-bye goldfish.
I didn't. Yeah. And but that was, it got some time to stay here, think about it, and then decided that I just wasn't going to go back. And then that was that actually wasn't the total push to do Empress Brokers full time. After that, I was kind of like, oh shoot, now I don't have a job. I need to what am I going to do? So
but did you go back and get your stuff? See, that's always in the movie.
You
where
didn't.
It's like, they get? You didn't.
I didn't. No, it just I didn't have much stuff, so it just boxed it up and sent it back.
Oh, that's
the
nice.
moving
Yeah.
company. And then actually this stuff's still in the boxes. I haven't even opened them. It's like stuff I didn't
COVID
need.
was a weird time.
It was a weird time. So some of those boxes are still unpacked, and there wasn't too many of them. And then that was, still, I think I knew I wanted to do Empress Brokers and work on my own business full time, but I kind of went into a panic mode of like, now I need income. It's like, what am I going to do? And I ended up getting another job that I worked kind of consulting stuff that was remote. Everyone's working remote at that time. And, wasn't up my alley, wasn't exactly what I wanted to do. And then, took some time and some consideration there to really, think and realize that, hey, I want to go back and do, what I started doing 10 years ago. And that's where I realized that, I set it up as Empress Brokers International because I wanted to be a customs broker at some point. And then, so I started studying for my customs broker exam and really kind of had to go in and start learning new things again, where I think I kind of like plateaued in my career. I was like, hey, cool, I'm at this cool position. And now I'm like, I got to start my own business. Like I need to start working again. I need to start learning again. I need to get back into that and build some skills that are useful to my clients or to potential clients. Because at that point I was starting at zero again. And figure out what's the best direction to take my business. And I kind of experiment. I just went back to what I was doing 10 years ago, got on Upwork instead of Odesk, and still had my profile and all that, still had my past reviews. And I was like, okay, I'm going to start applying for jobs and go and get some clients. And I'm still doing the same thing, now. But it took some time, definitely. I spent all my savings that I had in that transition to doing my own business. So that was something. It was at first it felt really like challenging. I was like, oh no, what am I doing? Like, what if this doesn't work out? But I'm out at a point where I'm like, hey, this is definitely what I should be doing and where I want to be.
So where did that sounds like a lot, but you did it, which is cool. Where did the name come from?
That's actually from a ship called the Empress of China. So it was something I was reading about. That was back when I was in school. I think it might have been a class assignment, actually. Like I said, I was writing papers about the guy that invented tofu, which was pretty fascinating. But we also had some other assignments like to talk about. I was focused on like U.S.-China history, whereas like the Russian students were talking, they're doing like Russia-China history or Japan-China history. And so that was one of the stories that, this was a story that came up, but the Empress of China was a ship that was built actually for the Revolutionary War in 1783 to fight in the Revolutionary War. But
that's
then,
really good. I just Googled it.
Yeah.
You are correct on the
Yeah. Okay. And then
he knows his stuff.
and then after they didn't need it because the war had concluded, so they used the ship as the first ship to sail from the U.S. to China. So it was the first ship under the newly independent U.S. flag to fly to sail from the U.S. to China, and it left on like I think it was George Washington's birthday in 1784, and then brought a bunch of silver over to China, and then came back with porcelain and a bunch of other things. And
oh, wow.
Thought it was an interesting story.
What ties into what you kind of do, too.
Yeah, and that's
Meaningful.
where I was like, Empress, it's a cool name. Kind of tied into that international trade, and it's a cool interesting kind of story. Like George Washington bought some porcelain that came back on that ship himself, and I just like imagine him, saying just the whole process of going through all that and what that was like. And I think that's what still keeps me excited about my job, is thinking about how goods travel. It could be a coffee cup, could be a porcelain plate or something like that. I mean, there's a lot that goes through that process to get you that plate or cup or whatever it is if it's imported. And it's still kind of the same as it was, 200 years ago. Things are still coming over on ships. You have customs processes that are pretty much the same. So it's all, someone's making it and they're getting the raw materials to make a plate and all that, some factory, or it's all very similar to as it was hundreds or even thousands of years ago. So it's kind of a cool, that's where I get some of the more, this inspiration or this, when I think about it in the big picture of things, it's just kind of a really cool space to be in.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, for everybody that's listening, can you explain a little bit more about what your business does for other businesses? So people know the word customs, but they might not understand trade policy or tariffs or things
or that
like
you had to take a test that I'm assuming was kind of difficult.
Yeah. So business operates as consultants. So we help companies that are new to importing and finding suppliers and manufacturers. So I basically say we do product sourcing, logistics, and import compliance are the areas that we help companies. So one of the services that we offer is helping companies find manufacturers and suppliers for their products. So, for example, if I want to find someone to make a mug that I designed, and I keep using the mug example because I have one in front of me here, but we can go out and help someone find a mug manufacturer, and that can be overseas or it can be in the U.S. So we actually do a lot of U.S. Product sourcing, finding manufacturers and suppliers in the U.S. And where we kind of stand out is we do this total landing cost analysis. So we can say, hey, if you buy this mug from China versus Mexico versus the U.S., here's your total landing cost, what it is to get it to your warehouse. And that includes things like the import duties, which are taxes for import. We include freight costs, that could be ocean, air costs, or even domestic transportation in the U.S. to figure out what that final cost is going to be for you and your business. And so that's one, where we spend a lot of time finding manufacturers and suppliers. A lot of companies we work with now are looking for manufacturers and suppliers outside of China. So we can find other ones in Asia, South America, or look at options for the U.S. And I love doing that. And then the other service is, logistics, so the transportation of goods, and that includes like the import processes as well, especially if it's coming from overseas. So we can help people find appropriate people to move their goods and do freight. I do a lot of audits right now of costs. So if you're someone that's importing goods already, or you're transporting stuff domestically, we'll look at their freight costs and give them some suggestions for cost savings. And I mean, one client, I've saved them over $1 million a year, just by identifying some real quick changes that they can make in how they manage their supply chain and who they use for freight. And then
what a benefit though that could be, like you're saying, you saved $1 million a year for a client. That's a huge amount of money. And
totally.
And so if you think about some of these small businesses that are producing clothes or mugs or things like that, having a conversation with you could potentially help them avoid spending a ton of money when they could actually save that money.
Absolutely. And yeah, one company I'm working with right now, they're smaller, and it was a couple of changes in how they of services that they pay for, and it was a couple of phone calls, and saved them about $15,000 a year. But it was stuff that's already it's really easy to implement. But it's more that educate, because when you're importing stuff, it gets really complicated. There's a lot of different terms that are used. There's different kinds of insurance. There's different pricing for different freight services. There's different ports you can go through. So we can use our review and go through and look at that and say, hey, these are some changes that you can make that make sense. A lot of times the accounting teams are looking at those, and they may not have the background in international trade. So they don't turn, like one thing that they that's really important for when you purchase goods in an international transaction is having something called an Incoterm, which is basically defines what the responsibilities and liabilities are of the seller versus the buyer. Like, to what point does the liability transfer? Who covers what cost?
Yeah.
You know, so if you don't know what those are, you don't really know what you should be paying for or what your liabilities are. And of course, the seller or others are going to take advantage of your lack of knowledge on that, to where you may be paying a lot more than you need to be, or you may be putting yourself in a riskier situation than you should be. And it's real fun for me to go look through those, particularly with small, medium-sized businesses, and say, hey, just make these changes, save you a bunch of money. And it doesn't take us that long, and I love doing that. And even with some larger companies, it's like that, the one saved like $1 million for it was fairly good sized company, but it was kind of a lack of just a close review, a detailed review, and it was just quick changes that they could make. So I really like to start with people that really love working with small businesses just getting started, that are just getting set up, first time shipping stuff in the ocean.
Help them get started right off the bat.
Yep, do it right, and you'll save money. You have to classify every product that comes into the U.S. So you have to figure out what the classification is, what category it is, and that determines what your import duties, what the tax is. And if you do that incorrectly, could lead to some challenges. There's a lot of legal liability if you're an importer to make sure that you're doing the right things. The biggest mistake anyone makes is they buy something overseas and then they just trust the seller to tell them what they should be doing.
It seems like there might be some gray area within that.
Well, there's not. It's very black and white, like in what you do.
But if they don't know.
Well, but that's like, it's still their responsibility, right? It's like, it's the same. I like to say it's like when you file your taxes, you can't say, oh, I didn't pay my taxes because I didn't know. Sorry, IRS. It just doesn't.
Right.
You have to know,
and
it's super complicated. Like, it's even if you're just doing your income taxes, there's a lot of questions and you need to know the answers to, and it's very black and white. So it's the same way when you're importing stuff. So a lot of people run into traps where they'll they'll order something on Alibaba.com or another overseas platform, and they say, hey, yeah, I want these these tractors are really cheap. Let's order them. Here, I'll send you $5,000. And then they never get them because they can't import them. They didn't have the right certifications, or they import them and then the import duties are, hundreds of percent. There was one company I was working with that does kind of interior design company, construction company, and they were looking to import some wood molding, going on the edge of walls and stuff from China, and they were going to order like 2 containers full. It was like $200,000 worth of goods. And he's like, hey, can you check this before I import it? Like, what do I need to do? And I think he had already made an initial deposit on it, and then looked it up, and it was subject to the regular import duties, but also some additional ones, which were anti-dumping and countervailing duties. And it ended up he would have to pay like a 250% tax on that. So,
oh my God.
Yeah, so he ended up, if he would have imported it, it would have been super expensive. And that happens all the time. People import it and they're like, hey, this is way more expensive than I was expecting, or I got a bill for it to pay this tax. And for small businesses, it can put them out of business if they all of a sudden they own.
They're like, God, I can't.
$400,000 to
You're like, this molding isn't worth it.
Yeah. At that point,
At
that point, you're like, oh man, you got collections agencies coming after you on behalf of the U.S. government. It's like you can avoid all of that, but it's just they don't make it easy. Unfortunately, the U.S. government doesn't make it easy for companies to go and find that information. We definitely advocate for them to make it easier, but we can help through that process, or at least provide some assurance to companies and say, hey, we checked this, this is what you should be aware of. These are the risks. And with that example, we were able to find them an alternative supplier in Chile, and then we were able to ship it up from there. And that wasn't subject to the additional duties. These ones were specific to China. So we were able to, say, hey, don't import these, or they decided like, hey, we can't afford this, and we found them an alternative supplier. The raw materials were a little bit higher cost, but at the end of the day, it wasn't additional.
Still save some money.
Exactly. And they were able to get product, and I think they're still working with that supplier.
So I remember one time you mentioned, and I'd like you to talk about it. You said you don't have to be at the port anymore.
Yeah.
So what does that mean for you, for clients, for people importing things or exporting?
Yep. So that's where a licensed customs broker individually, and the company also is. And traditionally, what you're doing there is you're submitting paperwork to U.S. Customs on behalf of a client or an importer, right? And I'm paying the duties also on your behalf. So if you imported something, I could pay the duties that are owed to the government on your behalf. And so I'm not actually acting as an active customs broker doing filings right now, but I'm licensed to do that, so I can work with companies on some of their customs business and work with other customs brokers on behalf of my clients. But you used to traditionally that would be a position where you're at the port and then you're collecting that paperwork. Everything's typed out, these forms, and you're just kind of the middleman in between that. You had to be licensed at every single port that you were operating in to have a permit there. And then they recently changed that just in 2019, and I think they were planning on doing it for some time anyways. But COVID may have made that quicker. I'm not sure, but it was now you can really do it remotely from anywhere. So it's not a position where you think of like traditionally I'm just doing the port of
carrying
Seattle.
Around a thing of folders and
paperwork running in between, at the shipyard. But traditionally that's kind of how it was, and now there's a national permit. So I have a national permit, so I can do that in any port in the U.S. And they had already been moving to that, but just last year in December. They officially changed the regulations on that. So now everyone can they have one permit that covers all ports in the U.S. So that's pretty cool.
Seems logical.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, gosh, this is so cool. And you're doing so well. You were just able to hire an employee, which is awesome.
Yep.
She's amazing. So we love to hear that your business is so successful and you're out there helping people save millions of dollars. Pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Big deal, but
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just, he just, wiped his shoulder a little bit and threw his hair back. You can't see it, but he did it.
But he did it. We saw it. We saw it.
Thank you so much. Before we end our episode, we always like to ask some rapid fire questions. And so we'll go ahead and do that. But before, we're going to take a moment to hear a word from our sponsor.
Thank you to Big Sky Economic Development for supporting The Vault at 201 North Broadway. Big Sky Economic Development provides leadership and resources for business creation, expansion, retention, new business recruitment, and community development.
My first question for you is, what is your favorite Chinese dish?
Mapo tofu. It's a tofu dish. Spicy, chilies. Oh, so good.
I'm really surprised because you seem to not really care about tofu.
You didn't even tell us.
It's my favorite. I love tofu.
Created it.
Yeah. I'll have to go find that essay and I can send it to you guys.
Perfect.
Give you the whole
Really
history.
excited.
We can do a whole course on.
Convert it to
Yeah, we need
English,
to know
please.
more.
I know a ton about tofu.
Yeah, we can't read Chinese, so.
So fix that.
Yeah, but okay, awesome. So it's a spicy, delicious tofu dish.
It's awesome.
Can you
Yep.
find it anywhere in town?
No.
Can
I think
you
at
make it?
Isabella Market they have some like
Oh.
prepackaged Mapo tofu that I had that was actually pretty good.
Okay.
It's like in a bag and you just heat it up.
Interesting.
It's really
Okay.
good. I should
I'll
go.
try it.
I should go buy some, bring it to the office.
Yeah,
try it.
might as well.
But some of the tofu I've had, I've actually really liked. I think I've had bad too.
I like
just
hot and
depending
sour
on where you
soup.
go.
Yeah.
Like Walker's has a dish that they have it in, and it's actually really good. It's like a curry or something.
Nice.
Yeah.
See, I had a
But-
deep fried tofu, but it was like a huge hunk of it, and I didn't love that.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I was just like, wow, I thought it was gonna be like little cubed
Yeah.
deep fried, and I was like, but then it was like a hearty triangle, and I was like, whoa.
One big chunk.
It was a huge chunk.
Oh,
So
gosh.
that wasn't for me, but I do like it in soups.
Yeah. No, it's
Miso.
good. Oh, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's
Love it.
fun. So, what's one of the coolest things you've helped import?
Animatronic unicorns.
Wow.
Okay, I'm gonna have
For
to Google
what?
what that is.
Do you know where it was going?
One of our clients that is in the entertainment space,
Okay.
and so that was a product that they had, consigned to custom made these like larger than life size animatronics, and so that was a really fun one. And that was kind of during the pandemic too, so there were some challenges with moving stuff around.
Oh, so you didn't have to meet it at the port.
No, I didn't have to meet at the
Dang
port.
it.
So, Yeah, and that was just a kind of an interesting one. It's like, what are you working on? And I was like, I remember when I told the
Importing
freight forward
unicorns.
exactly, and
There's
they're
gonna be a
animatronic
bunch of
ones, and they're from
animatronic
overseas.
unicorns on here.
I hope they sent you like a little one. It's like a souvenir, like a little bit, like a miniature.
I can get
version.
some. I can definitely
They
get
should
some.
have just sent it to
I think we
you.
should just get one
as
of
a
the
gift.
regular size animatronic unicorns.
I could find space for
Full
it.
size
It
one.
could fit in here.
We're actually working on one that you can sit on and ride. So
Wow,
Wow.
we did just lose the bison, so
Yeah.
why not
Have
have
a unicorn.
a riding unicorn?
yeah,
It seems reasonable.
I
for the
can
space.
import some.
Take it to meetings, all of that. It'd be fun.
Yeah.
It'd be awesome. Okay, my last question for you is: what is the best piece of business advice that you ever received?
I think it was just not taking things personal. And I forget how it was phrased, but when you apply for jobs or you receive feedback from clients, it's just a shift of saying that, I don't need to take this personal. If I don't get this job or if a client stops working with me, sometimes it's easy to take that and say, oh, I did something wrong, or I'm like, well, everyone has their own needs. They have, just separating that a little bit and just being like, hey, I don't need to take these failures and not even failures, just kind of setbacks personally. And that's, I think probably the best advice, and still work on that, now in business, and those challenges still come up. But I forget how it was phrased, but that's just something I always remind myself when there's setbacks. And a lot of it's just, there's a lot of things that are outside of my control. If it's something like a ship gets delayed or something like that, and the client's like, there was a hurricane last year, and then some shipments were delayed about a month for stuff that was needed, and it's like, hey, this is out of my control.
Or like the whole
Just
Panama Canal thing, right?
Yeah,
I can't go get the ship.
I can't go get the
reel it
ship.
in real
Yeah, so
quick.
it's like,
One, I can't drive a
Yeah.
ship that size.
yeah. So definitely have like this people pleasing where it's like I want to keep my clients happy, right?
Yeah.
But outside of that, I got to like step back and move on. I'm like, hey, this is out of my control. I can't do anything about this. Sorry. And then just communicating that to my client is something that's important through that process. But I can't go and control everything. There's certain things I can control and certain things I can't.
Absolutely.
No,
That's
I
great
think that's
advice.
really great. Before we go, Owen, where can we find you?
Yeah, where can people, if they
Follow
go,
you,
hey, I
find
need your
you.
help, where can they find you?
Rock 31, downtown Billings. So it's been awesome having an office here. That's where you can find me physically, or our website, empressbrokers.com, and just can reach out there. I'd love to talk with anyone, and really anyone that's interested in importing. First time you have some questions, love to talk to people. Those are my favorite. Like, it's the first time, and there's some potential to do some great things. Always love talking to people there. Or if it's a larger company or whoever, just feel free to give us a call, and always happy to chat.
Awesome. Owen, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to meet with us and share your journey and let us ask some weird questions.
Absolutely.
It's been
fun.
No, thank you.
It's been a blast. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining. You can find the resources and tools mentioned in today's episode at thevault201.com. If you like this episode, be sure to subscribe and share with a friend.